Marc Chandler at Marc Making Sense. How are you, buddy?
Surviving, barely, if I could say that.
You're what?
I said we're surviving, but barely. I mean, this is a very unusual circumstance. I mean, I think we're like at a precipice of major changes, geopolitical changes,
Yeah,
perhaps even the role of the dollar when everything's said and done, huh?
yeah. I mean, yeah. This is what all those gloom and doom books, Blood on the Streets, Crashing Dollar, all, stock market vulnerability, everything that, people wrote about 30 years ago is not theoretical anymore. We're living through it, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always two ways in which this could happen. One is encroachment. Somebody like perhaps China or a group of countries eating America's lunch. But that's not really what's happening. I suspect that it's a case of abdication. The US is just giving up. And you
Yeah,
know what illustrates it to me is the measles outbreak. It's in 4 or 5 states now
yeah,
and in Mexico. It's not just a disregard for the community of nation states that the US helped build for the last 50 years, but it's also just a disregard we have for our own people.
yeah, yeah. So we've turned inward, even with our own citizenry. So I know. How can you break a trading system that's been built up for 50 years and not have shockwaves?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of what is this all based on? You know, even when we make a trade, right? Our word is our bond. We make this. We're not signing. The papers have already been signed. We tell someone we bought something, and that's our word. That's our commitment, and that helps after repeated interactions. That builds cooperation. But what we
Trust.
have in the U.S. now is transactional. I mean, real estate is a one-off transactions. It's not the type of repeated interactions that foster cooperation. And so I think that that once we lose countries' trust, others' trust, the system really is it's sort of like a cancer and weakens all kinds of relationships, weakens the trust, undermines the system.
Yeah. So, Marc, I knew there was, reason behind you, lightening up and getting out of your apartment in New York. I mean, you foresaw that this could end up being that this kind of thing could manifest as an outcome.
But
Um,
I'm still very surprised. I mean, that it's sort of like everybody's we've seen the same cartoon where picture of President Trump shooting himself in the foot. Who would have thunk that we would have done these things? That like cut the nose to spite the face. Give you an example. Last week, the U.S. Refused to pay it's like financial like dues for the World Trade Organization. $25 million. It's not even a rounding error.
right.
You know, it's not a budget savings thing. It's more of a stick your finger in the eye of others.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we have this crisis, we're alone in it. Because
Yeah,
what they say, it's like, it takes a long time to build trust and takes, not a long time to destroy it and possibly never repair it again.
yeah. Though
So,
when it comes to the dollar, though, you know, there was this article. Katie Martin, who's an excellent journalist in the Financial Times, sort of suggested that Europeans have about $9 trillion worth of U.S. equities, and this might be this watershed where they repatriated. And of course, we did see the euro hold up well last week. U.S.
yeah,
stocks fall. It fits into that story, but I kind of think that we want to be careful in going that far out when there could be just a typical sort of cyclical factors going on, sort of like Occam's razor, right? The simpler
mhm,
solution is best. And that should be the first attempt. And what happened last year? Europeans bought about $108 billion worth of U.S. equities. They bought the dollar. They drove the dollar higher. They helped drive U.S. stocks higher. So they're
well,
unwinding some of that.
wasn't it also, I've been told, like Luke Roman said, it was the Chinese that were, instead of buying bonds, we're recirculating those dollars into NASDAQ 100 stocks. And when we told them we didn't want their money anymore, that their liquidation was a big part of the drawdown.
Yeah, I don't know if I mean, it could be true. I just haven't seen that in the data yet. I
Okay.
have seen Europeans record purchases of U.S. equities. And of course, I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to believe that's really so much of a Chinese story. But of course, it's one of those things, Dale, early in our careers, people would blame Bank Negara, Malaysian central bank, or they blame George Soros for inexplicable market moves. And the Chinese become this whipping boy where the evidence, Chinese own data is very scarce. It's not very transparent. So China is an easy one to blame. I'm not sure if I'm convinced of that, but I do
Okay.
think that we should probably be thinking that this is just a portfolio adjustment in response to these new macroeconomic factors, slower U.S. growth. A lot of economists revising down U.S. growth, pushing interest rates down, downgrading U.S. equity holdings. And so to me, this is still a, a cyclical story. I'm not convinced yet that this is, it is true that Canadians and Europeans seem to have a consumer boycott against the U.S., and it's
Yeah.
also going to affect tourism. But I'm not sure that we're seeing a capital strike quite yet. I become more
Okay.
convinced of a capital strike is if stocks fell and bonds fell and the dollar fell. And we're not really seeing
Okay.
that. We're seeing a lot of money flowing into the U.S. Treasury market,
Right.
fixed income market as a safe haven from equities.
You were bullish bonds a few months ago, Mark, when we talked. You say
Yep,
that's where you were parking that's where you parked the profit from your real estate sale in
I like to think
bonds.
it's the principle, maybe more principle than profit from the real estate transaction. But yeah, I mean, I
All
think that
right.
the U.S. economy is going to be slowing down. I mean,
Yeah.
I see over the weekend, Goldman Sachs revised up its odds of a recession. I think it's coming, and I think that the government cuts, the layoffs that we're going to be getting from the government sector, it hasn't filtered yet through to the jobs data, whether it's the weekly jobless claims, whether it's the government programs, or even this Friday we get the non-farm payroll number. It still looks like a fairly steady employment situation. But I think that the it's just on the horizon. We can see these things beginning to pile up. Job cuts are coming. It takes a while for it to filter through into the system. Slower growth. The crackdown. Of course, nobody likes illegal immigration, but the crackdown on legal immigration, is also going to slow the U.S. economy down, have a real cooling effect.
Yeah. Yeah. So and there are a lot of sectors of our economy before this election that were already in a recession, like manufacturing.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing. We talk about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., and we will, but it's not going to be because of jobs. The manufacturing sector employs only about 7% of Americans. That
Yeah.
means the rest of us who are working, leaving aside, say, 1% or so in agriculture, the rest of us work in services of some kind. We're going to get so that this manufacturing, yes, we'll bring back manufacturing capacity to the U.S., but it's going to be robotics and automated. It's not going to be a lot of jobs.
No, it's going to be AI.
Yeah, I mean, you see some of these modern factories in China, robotics.
Yeah.
You see like this whole say factory floor full of robotics and people just walking around to supervise the machines.
Yeah.
This is the future, and I think that this is behooves young people then to, and I tell this to when I can to young people, we got to begin investing in skills that AI cannot replace. Critical thinking, being able to evaluate conflicting claims. The Financial Times might have an article about why is the U.S. the last industrialized country with health care, and the Wall Street Journal might have an article. You know, this is creeping socialism in America, national health insurance. What's happening to us? And when I ask people, when I ask students or even my colleagues how to evaluate, we're often swayed by the last thing we read. We need to develop these critical analytic skills that help us understand and decipher what's truth and what's not, and it makes us better decision making. And I think these are something that the AI can't quite do yet.
Okay. Can you teach me in a few seconds? Because I don't know what to believe anymore, except my charts
Yes,
and
yes, it's
and
always
my friends.
Yeah, so
and people. Go
I'd
ahead.
say one thing that I really believe right now is that there's a strong correlation between the dollar yen and the U.S. 10-year yield.
Okay, I
So,
believe that. Yeah,
so yeah, and you should, and what's amazing to me is that it's a stronger correlation between the changes in the U.S. 10-year and
yeah,
dollar yen,
yeah.
stronger than the differential.
Wow.
So people say, oh, it's
Yeah,
really the differential, but it's really the treasury side of that equation that really drives it. So you want to know where dollar yen's going? Have a view on treasuries, and
yeah,
that'll get you three-quarters of the way home.
yeah. So yeah, I think the end's going sharply lower, but
And that
with
would make
yields, I
sense in
think
those
it
studies.
wasn't this. I mean, this was like just a correction in bonds that we had when the market recovered. And did you notice when the dollar wasn't caving last week, Mark? That's when we had a few days of equity buying. And then once the dollar started caving late in the week, that's when the spoos gave up the ghost.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's relationship between, let's say, the dollar, using the dollar index as a proxy and the S&P. We
Yeah,
were negatively correlated. That is, dollar index would go up, S&Ps could fall, and that really
yeah,
lasted from about the middle. I'm looking at a 30-day correlation. That's about as far as my typical trades could last, anyways. But
yeah,
the 30-day rolling correlation has been negative. It's now just about to turn positive for the first time since the middle of December. So the first time in 3 months. So that would be in line with what you're saying. Falling stocks mean a falling dollar in the current environment,
right.
but watch those correlations.
Yeah. All right. So when we look at what else is on the horizon, I've been talking about this for a while, and I'm not happy about being right about it. But when I saw President Trump and Netanyahu together on stage, and Netanyahu was almost orgasmic because Trump was delivering, and now they're moving carriers into that space and ultimatums, and then tagging the Chinese for using Iranian oil that they're processing. Uh, could it be, because this is what happens, that when an economy turns south, like the recession that you see coming, is that when at times nations go to war to distract and unify the country? Do you think this is in the cards, Mark? To me, it looks like it's written in cement.
Yeah, you're very depressing on a Monday morning. But
Well,
I mean,
you know what? We could do this call any day, and I could be just as depressing.
well, that's an optimistic thought. But yeah, but I do worry that we're coming to a like the precipice of a confrontation with China. It's not just the tariffs. And it's not
Yeah,
just the tariffs like you were saying, but they're not just going to tariff, like, say, crack down on Iranian oil, but they're cracking down on Venezuelan oil. And
yeah,
besides the other trade, these are secondary tariffs. But what concerns me is, this decision by C.K. Hutchison to postpone the deal with BlackRock over all those ports, including those two ports in Panama.
yeah,
And so people say, see, this is a communist country getting involved. But I don't know how different that is than the U.S., both parties objecting to Nippon Steel buying U.S. steel. And Japan is an ally of America's in a
yeah,
way that BlackRock is not an ally of China. So of course governments get involved with this, but I think this is a provocation. I think that this is the kind of thing that the Trump administration, some of the people in the Trump administration, will want to seize upon to show that China controls the Panama Canal and why we, the Americans, need to take it back. I worry about tomorrow, a couple of, I think it's three cabinet levels, Commerce, Treasury, and the Trade Representative Office are supposed to have reports on China's trade. And of course, these reports in the US are going to show that China unfairly subsidizes their companies and takes unfair trade advantage, takes advantage of the world, including the United States. And then, of course, we get those reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. And the Chinese have already warned publicly that if they're subject to these tariffs, they will take strong retaliatory measures. Now, we're not sure
yeah.
what that means, of course.
You know what it means, Mark. It means the things that we don't make that we need, that we depend on every day. while it takes 5 years to reshore manufacturing.
Yeah, it could be
So
a manufacturing, but I wonder if it's going to be even
no,
more
it's going to
subtle than
be.
that.
How about they produce all of our prescription drugs?
Yep. Well, I mean, that's also changing, but where I think they can have us by sort of the short hairs, so to speak, is critical materials and minerals. These we need for both military and civilian purposes.
Yeah,
And they don't only have the metals and minerals there, because they're not so rare despite the name, sort of like cryptocurrencies. They're not really currencies either, right? But
yeah,
I think what happens is that China also has its processing facilities. So it's not
yeah,
just digging up this cobalt or other rare metals, but it's being
yeah,
able to process them. And they've got that part of the supply chain in control as well. They could really hurt us if they wanted to. And I think this is where push is coming to shove.
yeah. They're going. They well, I mean, when the trade war was about to begin, they said they're willing to fight any kind of war with us. Pretty
Yeah,
strong.
it's scary. I mean, I think that you know we as like I say people in the United States for the most part have really avoided major wars. We haven't had a draft since Vietnam. But the
Yeah.
kind of world we're going to leave for our children and our grandchildren seems to be much more dangerous. Uh, it's not just about, what struck me was last week I saw this clip of President Trump, and he was talking about selling our allies our latest fighter jets. But he said we might remove some of the capability because we don't know how long they're going to be allies for.
Mm.
And this doesn't this goes beyond the trust. This means that in 2028, regardless of the U.S. political outcome, or the midterm elections, or we've got a couple of congressional special elections this week in Florida, a couple of seats that Trump had carried the region by 60%. And it looks like at least one of those seats can flip to the Democrat side. But anyways, I think that even come 2028, no matter what happens in U.S. politics, can Canada trust us?
No.
Can Denmark trust us?
There's been
Can
a
Asia
breach.
trust us? And that's what
No,
concerns me. I think that China is going to, assuming this is like a game theory, China wants to probe, I think, for the U.S. commitment in East Asia. And so that's why I don't like this idea of trying to call the U.S. a isolationist. The U.S. is not isolationist by any stretch of the imagination. It's unilateralist.
yeah.
It's trying to impose its will on other countries, including those who buy Venezuelan oil, like we did last year, or Iranian oil. We're talking about imposing our will without the WTO, without the UN, imposing the will because we're the strongest country in the world. Might makes right.
Yeah. So you just the way I look at things, Mark, um I just have to kind of just trade it. It's
Yeah,
the
and so I
only
think
way
what does
it's
it
the
mean to
only
trade?
way I feel in control is to, trade what I see on my charts.
Yeah, no, I,
And
I agree. And I think that that's why I like about the trading and about the discipline of technical analysis. With fundamental analysis that I spend most of my time doing, how do you know where you're wrong?
I know
Uh, and
Schwager
technicals help
says that.
Yeah, technicals help us measure, help us quantify where we're going to be wrong. 'Cause everybody knows what to do when they're right. It's when we're wrong that really is the measure of us. And I think that for me, the broad scenario is U.S. economy is going to be slowing, rates are going to be falling, the dollar follows the Fed. When market, as the market gets more in its head that a Fed cut is coming,
You were
which might not.
bullish here. You were bullish here last time, Mark, 3 months ago. You talked 108, 109.
Yeah, and I
I
still thought that
remember.
there could be. I thought there could be still on this pullback, I was afraid that maybe someone mentioned it before on the earlier part of the show, but 107, 107.30, to me, that's
Yeah,
important support. I thought we could go through that, but
yeah.
it's holding. We might have to go back down and test that area, seeing what
See
happens with
how
the
look
tariffs.
at all the confluence there. You have the
Yeah, so
50-day moving average there and everything. Yeah, flush people out, maybe go to 660 would be 38% back.
Yeah,
That'd be
I think that
enough.
yeah, I think in the big picture of things, we should be looking for stronger foreign currencies, weaker dollar, lower U.S. interest rates, and possibility, leaving aside this Q1, which is really skewed. I mean, think about the Atlanta Fed. Even now, when they say what the gold accounted for, we still be contracting, which is really more than the economists expect, more than the Federal Reserve expects. But maybe leaving aside Q1, it's really about the slowing down. It's going to show up in the labor market around the middle of the year. That's going to prompt the Fed to cut. It's not going to be that inflation is back to target. It's going to be that the perennial problem, sustaining aggregate demand. And we're going to see the weakness of the labor market, and it's going to raise concerns about how strong consumption can be going forward.
Banks are already sending letters out to their customers to ask about, it's voluntary. Are you doing well? Because they're worried about credit balances now.
Yeah,
And
we're
and
seeing
go ahead.
Yeah, no, we're seeing, I think to your point, we're seeing mortgage default delinquency rates rise, credit card delinquency rates rise. And,
Yeah,
we're going to have this big reset on in early June, I think, when the student loans and student debt becomes part of one's credit rating again. This is going to be a hit
right.
for a lot of people.
20 million. 20 million, I believe. So the key is in a crisis that the crisis is that you miss the opportunity. Even though humanitarian wise, we don't want to be opportunists, but that's our training in the markets. So it's not like we're taking advantage of people. We're just being good stewards of our own capital, right?
I think so. I think that, that appreciating the moves in the market, trying to preserve capital, especially in these times where some correlations have broken down, old relationships don't necessarily work. Uh, we owe it to ourselves, the hard work, we owe it to ourselves to be disciplined and prudent about what we're doing as it's really the respect, the markets could hurt us, the markets can make us rich. And it's really about being prudent about it, disciplined risk takers.
Yeah. And trading what you see and what kind of signals you're getting. It's for the first time in my career, Mark, I really noticed that the stock market has been politicized. It seems that most of the bears are Democrats, and the new bulls that have been bearish throughout the whole bull market, the new bulls are the Republicans, and they're trading the market with their hearts. They're buying Tesla. Okay, they're bullish the market, and I've never seen this in my career where because markets do well and they do lousy under both administrations, but it seems to be if you're not bullish the market, you must be a Democrat.
Yeah, Dale,
Have
to
you
your
noticed
point,
that?
yes, but I see this in other data too. I think this is partly what's going on with inflation expectations. It's a very clear partisan divide. Uh, Republicans do not expect inflation, Democrats do. And so when you look at these numbers, like the University of Michigan's consumer confidence numbers and the inflation numbers, we have to recognize that below these aggregate numbers is a great element of divergence, partisan divergence in the U.S. on perception. And this is part of the reason why I think that Powell was partly right for playing down the soft economic data, which are surveys skewed by these kind of partisan divergence as opposed to the real sector data. I think he's a bit too cautious, waiting for the soft data to filter into the real sector data. It might take a little bit while longer. I think it's going to come around middle of the year, but it's going to be coming, and by that time, monetary policy will be seen to be a little bit behind the curve again.
Yeah. Do you have confidence in Besant's grand plan? That I mean, that's what he's talking about is a grand plan. The world coming together and not spending money on defense. I think that's his um, kind of philosophical dream that he has, and he
Yeah,
says
but
he has experience doing that. I don't know.
yeah, I worry about the this great strategy. Even including over the weekend, there was talk that the reciprocal tariffs April 2nd, and
Yeah,
it still hasn't been decided. That these things are
yeah,
still like in flux, and so yeah, I'm not convinced that there's a big strategic plan. And you know, the election came out the way it came out, and
Yeah.
we sort of have to live with those results. And I just don't think that there's a great plan. And I think there's a lot of, but we see this with this. What I mentioned about the 25 million cut to the World Trade Organization, where there's measles outbreak in now 4 or 5 U.S. states spilling over to Mexico. It just seems like a general disregard and disinterest, but mindfully so, and like willingly. Like
Yeah.
we all know. I mean, I think as parents, we know we want to get a kid vaccinated, and before they go to public school, we have to before they go to public schools. And there's a reason why you can see this so clearly. Measles, high cases of measles, vaccinations, no measles. We can
Yeah.
solve these problems, like we can solve the economic problems. I think, to me, this is what I mean by abdication. We are our own worst enemy. It's not China eating our lunch. It's not these countries like Vietnam or Mexico, small countries, or even Ireland, who might take advantage of the situation with the low taxes and the U.S., all these loopholes in the U.S. We are our own worst enemy. We can fix our own problems. Maybe this is part of me that's Jewish, that thinks that the Messiah is coming, but he's not here yet, and that what's
Some
going to
people
save
believe
us.
he is.
Yes, and so my
Uh,
people think we're waiting for him, but he's not next
yeah.
door. He's not next door. He's not at Goldman Sachs. He's not at Merrill Lynch. We can save our own butts by doing the right thing, and I think we all know what the right thing to do is. Vaccinations, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark, I tell you what, thanks. My bill for this session is in the mail, and I'm glad that you got you got to verbalize, and you're talking about things that people think about and are less willing to speak out, which is kind of a weird thing, which is a change. That
Yeah,
people even have second thoughts about expressing themselves.
yeah.
It's
Dale,
kind of a
there's this
weird
quote
vibe, huh?
I came across this quote, and I guess it's disputed who said it, but they said it about Germany. They said 1/3 of the people watch the other third of the people kill the other third of the people. Is this what America is becoming? People are censoring themselves. You know, a year or 2 years ago, corporate leaders were embracing DEI for the same reason that I would, because it leads to better decision making when you have diversity of people, not just skin color, race, religion, gender, all those stuff, but how people solve problems. So neurodiversity. And
Yeah.
now Trump says it's not good. Everybody's moved away from it. And I see this in the self-censorship, even the AIs that I use to generate art for my blog. The censorship there is just remarkable. And to me, this is the age that we live in. We got to acquire creativity to work around these barriers.
Yeah. Well, let me know when the club starts. I'm a member. And I always appreciate talking to you, Mark. You're a watchman for us. And when you bring when, and you're not the type of guy that I've been talking to you for a decade. You're not an alarmist, okay? You're far from it. You would always talk me down from the clouds, okay? So take what Mark says and think about it, okay? Because we have to think, and we can't be afraid not to speak. Thanks for your courage today, buddy.
Thanks, Dale. Good luck to everybody.
Yeah, really, Mark. Great to hear you. So follow Mark on X at Mark Making Sense, and follow his calls on the markets, because it's going to be important. He saw this coming a while ago. I know that's why he, you know, got out of sold his apartment in New York City and bought bonds. He didn't buy the Mag 7 or Apple because it's safe. Anyway, guys, have a great rest of the day. You could join the team in 15 minutes. Remember, don't just count your pips, count your blessings. And I'll see everyone for Turnaround Tuesday. Looks like we're going to have a little dollar rally to sell and a break to buy, like Greg had talked about, and Mark. So do your fibs, do your work so you can execute, okay? Instead of impulse trading on the fly. Adios, everyone. See you tomorrow. Thanks again, Mark.
Hey traders, this is Blake Morrow with ForexAnalytix. Thanks for stopping by our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like these videos, share them, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the content that we provide here for free. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video.